Welcome to our final installment of Operations Management and Planning. An exciting field. Normally in some schools, this is a whole major. But we are just giving an overview of the high points of this. Hopefully it'll pique your interest. Now, a big part of operations management is controlling inventory. That's because inventory is a huge cost. You're storing something. You need to have a building to store the inventory or a lot to store the inventory. You need to buy the inventory. There's money sitting there on the shelves. It's a huge, huge investment. So how do you manage this inventory? Well, if you never thought about it before, you'd probably start out by using perpetual inventory. What that is you just keep track of how much inventory you have, and when it falls to a particular level, you order some more. It's not particularly sophisticated. I mean, you can use computers to scan and to know how many, if you're Walmart, how many Band-Aids you have on the shelf, so you could order more, or tissues. But basically, it's as things get down to a particular level, you order more. Well, managing the inventory is a costly thing. Some of you may have done this at your work. You have to do it at night. It takes people to do it, to check your inventory and to count it. It's boring work. It's awful, awful work to do. Not challenging, boring work. Well, let's think about this for a second. Let's suppose you're a grocery store and you run out of Pepperidge Farm bread. Who gets hurt? Well, maybe the person coming in that wanted to buy Pepperidge Farm bread instead buys Dave's Killer bread. That's a good bread. Better bread, maybe. So who gets hurt? Not the customer, but the vendor, the supplier is the one that gets hurt. So why not put the supplier in charge of managing their inventory? That's what happens. Grocery stores are a great example. The Coke and the Pepsi people stock the Coke and the Pepsi. The Campbell soup person stocks the Campbell soup. The bread people stock the bread. If you're a liquor store, Coke stocks the liquor. Or not the liquor, but the Coke. So put the inventory in the hands of the supplier. There's a good story that one student had of Home Depot, where Scots came in, and when they would put the grass seed and fertilizer in, they would hide the other guy's stuff. And when the other guy came in, they would hide the Scots stuff. So there can be other games that get played. But also those vendors will be looking at trying to get some information about what their competition is doing. Right? You can get market research that way. Well, the gold standard in inventory control is just-in-time inventory. Just-in-time inventory is inventory that arrives just when you need it. I don't need, if I'm making Harley-Davidson motorcycles, and I'm going to make 100 motorcycles in a day, I don't need 1,000 tires. They're just sitting out there, eating up space, costing me money. I have to pay taxes on the room and all that kind of stuff. I only need 200 tires. Well, what about the tires for tomorrow that I need for tomorrow when I make motorcycles? They'll arrive tonight. And the inventory for the next day follows the next night and the next. You'll see, if you pay attention to some of these things, sometimes you'll see people like UPS or FedEx saying, things like, "We love logistics. Let us hold your inventory." The idea is that the inventory is moving constantly. This is a big part of supply chain management, which, as I said earlier, is a huge field these days. Well, we can also look at some planning tools that get used when we talk about operations management. It's project management in this case. But here's a Gantt chart for making a teddy bear. This is right out of the book. It's okay. But it shows you when work has to get done, how much has been done, and what's still to be done. It's a graphical image. Now, typically across, this is activity and day. So this is how many days it takes to build a Vermont teddy bear. It might be hours, could be weeks. You can imagine a Gantt chart for building a home. The first thing you got to do is clear the lot. Then you got to dig the foundation. Then you're going to pour the foundation. Then you're going to frame the house. Right? And certain things have to be done in certain orders. Even this teddy bear, you can't dress the teddy bear until you've gotten, the accessories sewn or whatever. Right? You have to stuff the thing first. But it's hard to tell from this what needs to get done and what can get done in what order. A tool that's better for that is called a PERT chart. A PERT chart shows you what has to be done and in what order. So you'll see along a particular path the tasks that need to get done. This is building the same teddy bear. And it tells you how long it takes to do each of those. Now, an important aspect you'll see here in red, right down the middle, is something called the critical path. Important concept for you to know, hint, hint. The critical path are those items which, if they take 1 minute longer, or 1 day longer, depending upon your project, will cause the project to be delayed. You'll notice that cutting material for clothes up here is not in the critical path. Right? This critical path here takes 40 minutes, but these things only take 10 minutes, and these things down here only take 15 minutes. These things could be a little late and still get the project done on time. The importance of the critical path is if any of these tasks are delayed, the project is delayed. So if you're ever going to do a project, it is very important to know what your critical path is. You watch these others too, because if they got delayed enough, they could become the critical path. So know what a Gantt chart is and know what a PERT chart is. Now I'll cover some of these other topics very briefly. Computer-aided design. You're probably familiar with those things. I use computers to design an airplane, or we use computers to design cars. You can't do those things with papers and pencils anymore. You could never design a Boeing airplane with paper and pencil. Computer-aided manufacture, the big innovation there is 3D printers. I can print products. I don't have to have cast die molds and things like that. And I can put these things all together, so I can design something on a computer and I can create it using computer-aided manufacture. Now, operations management is not just for manufacturing, but also for services. Think about operations like insurance companies. Right? Somebody has to process claims that are made. Think about operations like a 911 center. They still have to concern themselves with timeliness, capacity planning, for example, in the case of 911. So these are also part of operations. Who's running the operation? How many people do I have? How long does it take to get my operation finished? Last topic I want to cover briefly is outsourcing. Outsourcing is taking a function that you do internally, normally to a business, and giving it to another business. It doesn't mean it has to go out of the country. We tend to think of outsourcing as going outside the country, but it doesn't have to. The college, for example, outsources the cafeteria work. It outsources the security. Why? Because those are things that are not part of the main focus of the college, and no reason for the college to have that expertise or to have to learn that expertise. Give it to people who are good at it. So outsourcing is a way for a business to focus on what it does well. Now, there's a couple of other topics that I glanced over or glossed over here. Be sure you're reading the text. And see you next time.